got me. Yeah, we lean on each other, just you wait and see. A little bit of faith goes a long, long way. And I believe in a brighter day. Yeah, say I believe in a brighter day. When the sun is shining and the clouds roll away, when the whole I found is here to stay. Now I believe in a brighter day. You know, I believe in a brighter day. You know, I believe in a brighter day.
Good morning, New Life. We are not having technical difficulties. I'm just embarrassed to show you how I look 7 weeks into the shelter in place without a visit to the salon. Now, I know I look like, but you probably look better than this. But with Foster's magical editing skills, I can go from this to this. Hopefully this is a little bit better. Thanks, Foster. Well, don't forget that we have our Connect card online, and we would love for you to go ahead and fill that Connect card out, and this would allow us just to partner with you. Now, if you're new and joining us for the first time, thank you for joining us and finding us online. This Connect card is going to help us partner with you so we know how to provide any services that you might need, or say that you need some help getting to the grocery store. We can totally partner with you on that, and we have volunteers ready and willing to step up to the plate here. We also have a giving link that's going to pop up in the chat box right now. Thank you once again to all of those who have given generously to keep New Life going during this uncertain time. And hopefully in the future, the near future, we'll be meeting together again soon. So if you are ready to give, go ahead and click on that giving link inside the chat box. And as always, if you have any questions about New Life, feel free to mark that on your Connect card, and we'd be happy to answer those. Last week, Ron talked about our 6K challenge. So hopefully some of you are working on your 6K challenge. We're partnering with World Vision to raise funds. 6K is the amount of not really miles, but the distance that some people in countries have to walk just to get clean water. And sometimes that water is not even the cleanest water that they're getting. So we have partnered with World Vision to do a 6K, and it's going to look a little different because of the COVID-19 and shelter in place. And some of you have already been posting on our New Life page some of your challenges. So keep that coming. If you have any questions about the 6K, there's a link in the chat box, and you can go ahead and click that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Joel now.
Hey, New Life. I hope you're having a great morning as we're gathering together in this digital space. And I love that we have these tools and technologies available to us as we figure out what being church in this current season looks like. It would be tragic if we weren't able to be connected in some way. And we're learning it and figuring it out together. And I love that. And I'm so grateful for you jumping into this time with us. One of the challenges, I think, for us as we're moving forward is figuring out how do we connect not just with each other, but how do we connect with God in this time and in this season? I think when we're able to gather together, one of the things that happens is God is there in the midst with us, and we're able to connect with him through our times together, through our musical expressions of worship. And yet, you may feel somewhat limited in your ability not just to connect with others, but perhaps even to connect with God. And here's what I want you to know. He's not limited in his ability to connect with you right where you're at. And I think some of the things that we need to pioneer and figure out in this season is how do we engage with God when we can feel kind of separated and isolated? And a lot of our normal ways of doing that, our corporate gatherings, our corporate times of worship through music, well, we're just not able to do that in this season. And so one of the things that we want to do is to help you discover more about how you can engage with God and connect with him. And so I want to introduce you to someone who's a member of our church community, Marty Schwebel. Marty is a licensed therapist right here in our community. He operates New Roads Counseling, and he's been a pastor in his life experience and a missionary, and he's served in our church in various ways on worship teams and other things. And Marty and I have been talking. So Marty, what can we do to help people engage with God and connect with them in this season? And so Marty's going to lead us in a time of kind of, think of it as contemplative prayer or engagement prayer with God. And this may be a new thought or a new idea for you, but I just want to encourage you as Marty leads us in these next few moments, just kind of quiet yourself and take part in this and see if this is a way that you can begin to engage with God that's helpful, because just because there's limitations around us doesn't mean we have to be limited in reaching out to him. So here's Marty, and I hope you enjoy this next few moments.
Thank you, Joel, and hello, New Life. It's so good to be here, and I'm excited to share with you this prayer called Emmanuel Prayer. Emmanuel, again, means God with us. He is with us and always present. I learned this approach about a year ago, and it quickly became a part of my prayer practice and has been really a part of my faith being strengthened. And I've shared it with friends and family, shared it with my small group at New Life, and now I'd like to share it with the entire church. It's really in 4 simple steps. Number 1, you just ask God to bring up a positive memory that you've had with him, where you've felt his presence. Secondly, you just spend time in that memory and you appreciate God. You just spend time appreciating him. Third, because he is Emmanuel, God with us, you locate him in the here and now. He's with us in the past, but also in the present. So spend time locating him. And as you locate him, as you sense his presence in the here and now, then the 4th thing to do is to ask him this simple question: Lord, what is it you want me to know? And then you listen and you wait and you enter into a dialogue with him. So let's try this together as a church today and enjoy the presence of Jesus today. So as you are there in your home, take some deep breaths, center yourself, and begin to pray. You can pray out loud if you want, or to yourself. You can close your eyes or leave them open and just say, Lord, help bring up a positive memory, a time where I was blessed to be with you, a time where I felt your presence and your love and your peace and your hope in my life. Let him bring up that memory for you. Now just enjoy that memory. Spend time in it. Enjoy what you see, what you hear, what you smell. Now begin some time appreciating. 120 seconds of appreciation is enough to build our relational circuitry and our connection with God. Appreciate him now. Thank him for this special memory. And now, Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, is present with you right now. Locate him. Where is he? Is he sitting next to you? Is he standing? Where is he right now? Connect with him. As you connect with Jesus, ask him, Lord, what do you want me to know? And just listen. I hope this practice is one that you can use every day by yourself and with others in community. I hope it's a blessing to you today and will continue to be a blessing to you in the days to come. Lord bless you and keep you, New Life.
Well, Marty, thank you for leading us through that time of prayer and reflection. And I love that idea of Emmanuel prayer. Emmanuel meaning God with us. I mean, that's the hope of what we celebrate every year at Christmas, that God is with us. And that's not just a Christmas truth, that's a lifelong, year-round, pandemic or not truth. And we can reach out and pray and interact with him because he's come to be a part of our story and to meet us wherever we're at and to bring us into new life and relationship with him. And I hope for you that that's not just something that would be a one-time moment, but maybe it could be a part of your ongoing spiritual practice and engagement with God. And to continue helping us to learn in this, we're actually going to be hosting a longer Emmanuel prayer time together, and Marty's going to be leading us through this. And it's actually going to be happening this coming week on May 6th at 12:30, so right in the middle of the lunch hour. And we're going to Zoom in together and have a time. And so we're going to post some more information. So follow us on Facebook, look to our social media, and we'll let you know more about that. But I really want to encourage you to step into that time and learn more about this tool that can help you encounter God and engage with him. Because here's the reality, he is with us. So just because we may be limited to a specific geographical location as we're sheltering in place, doesn't mean that God's limited in meeting us right where we're at. And so I want to invite you to come to that. We're going to continue in our service now. And so I hope you continue to have a great morning. And here we go.
At a time in our lives when so much of the day-to-day is the same, and we're all doing jobs we've never done before in ways that we've never done them, life to say the least is a little challenging right now. And I don't know about you, but in the first few weeks, it was all fun and fine. The boys were getting along, we were enjoying each other, we were just so creative with the way we were spending our time, and it just felt like there was so much space just to be together. Now I can say 2 months in, we are over it all. And I'm seeing on the internet like people making bread and they're making movies and they're making all these funny memes. And my husband is included in that bunch. He's rocking it, by the way. But I'm over here like, well, everybody put on pants and no one required a trip to the ER. But seriously, I think everyone's definition of victory right now is just going to be different. And a few years back, I heard this concept of victory that I'm really resonating with during this time. And I just wanted to share it with you. It's the concept of not quitting. And sometimes it takes all of our energy to just keep not quitting. There are days when you feel like you're in the right lane and you have a whole cloud of witnesses cheering you on. Then there are the days, where the heavens seem silent and you feel like you're trudging through mud without an end game. And we know that we're more than conquerors, and we know that we should be strong and courageous, and we know that with God all things are possible. But there are times when those words feel far away from the reality of our current lives. And then sometimes the greatest act of faith is our stubbornness. Keep not quitting. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep showing up. Keep praying. Keep standing. Keep working. Keep teaching. Even if there are days when you feel like the only success was that you didn't quit, well, you're still there. I call that a victory. You are working the muscles of perseverance and selflessness and service and hopefulness. You're not someone who just shows up when it's easy and leaves when it's time to dig in. You are committed to seeing mountains move. You are not easily undone by fear. You are choosing life, friend. Victory doesn't always look how we think it should. Sometimes the victory is the seed that falls to the ground and dies for new life to be born. This is not the end. Keep not quitting for today at least. Find ways to cultivate joy and rest and renewal as an act of resistance. Don't underestimate faithfulness or stubbornness. Small acts of faith are still acts of faith. Keep not quitting.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Sunday morning, and we are streaming to you from New Life in Petaluma, California. So all of you in the Petaluma area, hey, very good morning to you. For those of you in the other parts of the United States and around the world, I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. We're so glad that you have tuned in and that you're following along with us during this season and hopefully even beyond this season. So I have a question for you. Does life seem a little weird? Well, if it seems a little weird, that's because it is weird. This is the first pandemic we've had in about 100 years. It's the first one in the modern era. And somebody said something to me the other day that I thought encapsulated that in a pretty good way. It says, they said to me, this is a weird year. February had 29 days, March had 31, and April had 100. And I think that says it. Those are my sentiments pretty much exactly. And so I want to talk for just a minute about what our governor said recently, because it really affects who we are as a church and what we get to do. Because he indicated that it's going to be several months, maybe 5, 6, 7 months, before there's any hope of us meeting together on our campus in any form of a large group setting. And I know that could be discouraging for all of us, but I want to say this: your leaders are working behind the scenes, and we are working on some new things, because our goal is not just that we could survive during this time. We actually want to thrive during this time. So look for more things coming down the pike from us that will help us as a church thrive during this time. And one of the things that we put together on purpose is this teaching series called Rise Above. Because we want to be able to rise above all the pressure and everything that comes with this season of sheltering in place. And so this whole series is based on the life of a guy whose life was captured in the Bible. His name is Joseph. And this is not Joseph, the husband of Mary, who was the mother of Jesus, but this is Joseph, the guy who had the technicolored coat that Hollywood made a movie about. It's that Joseph. And today's teaching is very well encapsulated in the word picture of photography. The name of our teaching is Dark Rooms. And so I've got a camera around my neck on purpose, because I want us to go back to sort of the old school days when cameras like this had real film in them. And once you had exposed all the pictures on the film, you rewound the film, and then you took it to a place that would develop it, and they would take the film out of the canister, and then they would transfer the images onto photograph paper, and then they took the photograph paper into a place called the dark room. And in the dark room, it is what it said. It was very dark, and there were special chemicals there called developers, and they would take the photo paper and they'd leave it in the developer for a specified amount of time, and then they would take it out of the developer and stop that chemical process, hang it up and let it dry, and that's how your pictures got developed. Now, one of the things that we learned from that old school photography is a wonderful principle that we're going to teach today, and that is this: what develops in the dark becomes beautiful in the light. That one principle. What develops in the dark becomes beautiful in the light. Now, one of my hobbies is photography, and I brought along some things that I've sort of developed in my own dark room of photography. And the first one is this. It's a beautiful waterfall. It's called Bridal Veil Falls. It's just outside of Portland, Oregon. And I just happened to be there at the time when the light was just right to capture it. And the second picture is a picture just outside of Honolulu it's a beachscape at the Outrigger Canoe Club. just outside of Honolulu. And again, the light was just right. The colors were brilliant. The third is taken at Disney World down in Florida. There's a butterfly sanctuary. And I just happened to catch these two butterflies resting on a leaf. And my goodness, the amazing colors that God puts all through nature are so well exhibited there. And then the last photograph is one of my favorites. It simply is a sunrise coming through a tree on a friend's property just outside of Petaluma. Now, all those things illustrate our one principle. It's what develops in the dark that actually becomes beautiful in the light. And that was certainly true in Joseph's life. So let's take a minute to peruse his story. Joseph is born the youngest of 11 brothers, and he's got a sister or two as siblings. And when he's in his early teens, maybe 13, 14, he has a couple of dreams. And so Joseph, unfortunately, as a young teenager, decides to be that guy who sat his family down and said, hey, listen to this. I had these dreams, and I'm going to be the chief in our family eventually. Eventually, all of you are going to bow down to me, and you're going to take your orders from me. Well, that didn't sit well with his family, and his older brothers decided that guy was not actually welcome in the family anymore. And when they had the opportunity, they sold Joseph to a slave trader. And the slave trader put him in shackles and put him on a wagon and carted him hundreds of miles down to a country called Egypt, which happened to be the superpower of the world at the time. And the reigning emperor was called Pharaoh. That was their term for emperor. And the highest bidder for Joseph turned out to be the captain of Pharaoh's personal bodyguards. So in a way, Joseph was sold into slavery, into sort of semi-royalty. It was a beautiful home. It was a beautiful estate, but Joseph was still a slave, and he still started at the bottom. And he probably started out planting, planting seeds in the hot sun and hoeing and raking and shoveling and doing the things that slaves in the bottom of the totem pole do. But there was something that was developing in Joseph during this dark time of his life. And Joseph turned a corner and decided, instead of being bitter and angry, that he would make something of himself. And so he began to develop new skills and to work diligently and to be 100% reliable and honest. And it wasn't long until the guy who bought him, his name was Potiphar, figured out that Joseph was actually more brilliant than he was. So he decided that he would start putting things under Joseph's control. And I don't know the order it took, but I do know this. Eventually, Joseph was in charge of all the crews that planted. And then Joseph was put in charge of all the crews that watered and fertilized. And he was put in charge of all the crews that harvested. And he was put in charge of all the people who cleaned the house. And he was put in charge of all the people who did maintenance and upkeep. And he was put in charge of all the people who ran the kitchen and cooked for the entire household. And he was put in charge of all the people who kept the books. And he was put in charge of the people who made the investments. And eventually, Joseph was put in charge of everything in Potiphar's house. It's all well and good. Joseph thinks this is awesome, until one day Mrs. Potiphar decides that Joseph is a handsome hunk. And the Bible says that he was well built and he was really good looking. And so, as Pastor Joel said last week, she fell in lust with him. And one day when he was in the house, she grabbed him and she said, "Come lie with me." And he said, and he pushed her away and he said, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that and sin against you and defile you. I can't do that and sin against Potiphar. I can't do that and sin against God." And as he turned to run, she grabbed his coat and he left it and fled. And when Potiphar got home, She trumped up this charge that Joseph had tried to molest and rape her, and Joseph was arrested, taken to trial, and he was convicted of attempted rape, and he was sentenced to time in prison. And it was there in prison, an even darker room, that Joseph had a choice. Would he be bitter and angry, or would he let God develop something in him? And while he was there are three other characters that come into his life. The warden, and to make a long story short, the warden did with Joseph exactly what Potiphar did. He started putting him in charge of the operation of the prison, and pretty soon Joseph was running the whole prison, and the warden was just getting paid for it. Two other guys come into Joseph's life. One is the pastry chef of Pharaoh, and the other is the sommelier of Pharaoh as well. And they come into Joseph's life because evidently there was an event that went bad in the royal room. And I don't know what it was. It could be that the pastry chef served a bacon scone to a vegetarian dignitary. It could be that Pharaoh ordered Merlot and got served Chardonnay. I don't know what the deal was. But I know that both of them messed up and the situation got awkward and Pharaoh got mad and he threw them in prison until he could decide what to do with them. And it was in prison that they had a dream, each one of them. And God spoke to Joseph and said, hey, your two buddies that just came to prison and had dreams, here's the interpretation. And so Joseph gave the interpretation of the dream to each of those guys, and within 3 days, both of those dreams came true exactly as Joseph said they would. And the last thing that Joseph said to the sommelier as he was leaving prison is, please remember me to Pharaoh because I'm unjustly here. But Genesis chapter 40 ends, and it's really sad. It says, but that guy forgot Joseph, and he forgot him for 2 straight years. Friends, that's a dark room. Joseph has been there already multiple years. But things like that don't just happen to Joseph. They happen to all of us. And so I want you to watch a video. It's about the life of J.K. Rowling. And boy, she had some dark times in her life. And I know that some Christians have a problem with all the Harry Potter books and the wizardry and all that. And I'm not going to speak to that right now, but for a moment, if you could set aside all of that stuff and just think about J.K. Rowling as a human being. There's something she learned in the dark times of her life that I think could be incredibly powerful for us. So let's take a look at that video right now.
While on a train at age 25, an idea struck J.K. Rowling like a bolt of lightning. Boy doesn't know he's a wizard goes to wizard school. Not having a pen on her at the time, Rowling sat on the train as the ideas came flooding in. That night she began writing her first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. She didn't know it at the time, but years later those very words would spark the imagination of millions of children worldwide. Shortly after she began writing, however, her mother passed away. Regrettably, Rowling had never shared with her mother the wonders of Harry Potter. The years after her mother's passing were hard for Rowling. As a struggling writer, she married and had her first child. However, the marriage was short-lived. Reflecting on this period, Rowling says, I had failed on an epic scale. In her own words, this was when she entered the darkest period of her life and questioned whether she would get through it. Amidst the darkness, Rowling found comfort in her writing and went on to complete the Harry Potter series. These very years, the ones that tested her resolve and inner strength, formed much of her writing and ultimately how the series would unfold. Many of the characters and creatures that make up the wizarding world arose from this dark period of her life. She would later reflect, the books wouldn't be what they are if she hadn't have died. I mean, her death is virtually on every other page of the Harry Potter books. Harry Potter has since become the best-selling book series in history. The books have sold over 400 million copies, and the movie series has grossed $5.3 billion in total. Rowling is now credited with doing more for childhood literacy than any other person in history. She now views her dark period as providing the very direction she needed to focus on the only work that mattered to her, being a mother and telling great stories. And so rock bottom became the solid foundation upon which I rebuilt my life, Rowling acknowledges. In life, it is not what happens to us that matters, but rather how we choose to interpret what happens and therefore who we become as a result. You know you've found the hidden wisdom in your deepest scar when you view it as your greatest gift.
Isn't that amazing? So here is what J.K. Rowling learned during that time. It's so clear. What happens to us is not nearly as important as how we interpret what happens to us. It's the story that we write. And so as we approach the question of how can we or how should we handle these dark times, in that story that you just saw, apparently James, who was the brother of Jesus, learned that same lesson 2 millennia before J.K. Rowling, because here's what James writes to us, and I want to read it to you straight from the Bible. James says, "Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, that's the dark rooms, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let the dark room time do its work so you become mature," and look at this next word, well developed. You see, it's what develops in the dark rooms that makes us beautiful in the light. And then he says, you will not be deficient in any way. So, what can we learn from that? Well, here's the interesting question. How or what determines how we interpret what happens to us? What is it that is that developing solution that determines whether the narrative we write is good or bad, becomes productive in our lives, or becomes destructive? Well, I want you to take a look at this principle, because the wrong developer starts with the word why. And this is the question that we often ask. Why has this happened to me? There are people way worse than me that have never had this happen to them. What have I done to deserve this? Why has this happened to me? And friends, that's actually the wrong developer. Because if you follow that out, it can lead only to bad places. Let's just assume for a minute that what has happened to us is great. Well, when we start asking, why has this happened to me? Typically, it leads to 2 places. Number 1 is, I deserve it. I might actually just be better than other people because I was born into this situation, inherited this situation, and that's a sense of entitlement. Or if we were born poor and we became rich through hard work and industry, we can write the narrative because I've earned it. I actually deserve this. Well, neither one of those bring out the best in us. Let's assume for a minute that what happens to us isn't good. So then we get into this, why has this happened to me? And it usually leads to one of 2 conclusions. Number 1, there's something wrong with me. There was something wrong with me when I was born. So evidently, God knows I deserve this. And it's my punishment for being defective. Or, if we're not willing to settle for that answer, then there's something wrong with God. Because I don't deserve this. And yet somehow, God has allowed this to come in my life. And friends, I want to say that the more we get hung up on the why, the chances are that our conclusions will actually not help us at all. And oftentimes, it's way more complicated than anything we think. But there is a better developer. There is a right developer in our lives, and that's this. When we ask ourselves, what do I know and believe? In these dark times, in this dark room situation, what do I know and believe that would make a difference in my life? Because when we focus on the why, we often get what I call the spinning wheel of unfairness. It never resolves. It just leaves us in this unfair condition. So, what do I know and believe? Let's see how a guy from Scripture, who actually was a key person in the Bible, his name was Paul, let's see what he wrote from his own dark room, his own prison cell. This is what he wrote. Paul said, and I want to read it to you, Paul said, I have no regrets. I couldn't be more sure of my ground. The one I've trusted in can take care of what I've entrusted to him right to the end. Wow. He said, this is what I know. God is good. I know that. And I've trusted him. And I know that he's going to take care of me in spite of the fact that I'm writing to you from prison. And why could Paul be so sure that he could believe in that? Because earlier in his life, he wrote this. Before he was ever put in prison, he wrote this. He said, we can be sure that every detail in our lives of love for God is worked into something good. So Paul said, look, I'm convinced that God is good, that God is for me, and there's no dark room in the world that can tell me any different, because as long as I'm in this dark room, I'm going to trust and believe that God is good and God is for me. And then he said, it gets even better than that, because in these dark rooms, I know that even this, God is working into something good in my life. And friends, I would tell you that no matter how hard you're struggling during this time, and maybe what you're struggling with has nothing to do with COVID. Maybe what you're struggling with has everything to do with your marriage or some other health thing, or a problem you're having with a child, or the loss of a child, or the loss of a mate, or the loss of your job. It could be anything. Paul would say to you, in this dark room of your life, know this for sure. God is good. He's for you. And that God is at work even in this detail to bring something good out of your life. That truth is so well encapsulated in a Lauren Daigle song. If we go back to the story of Joseph, here's an interesting question. Is this story going to end well for Joseph? As of right now, he's in prison, and he's been there for a number of years, and he's forgotten. Will the story end well? Well, Joseph doesn't know that for sure, but he does know that God is good and that God's at work in his life, and he knows that his job is to trust in God. And that message is captured so well in this Lauren Daigle song that is sung for us by Sarah Guilford, one of our band leaders and a great singer. Listen as she carries these lyrics into our hearts.
Letting go of every dream, and lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. sing. So in all things be my life and bread. I want what you want, Lord, and nothing less.
Thank you, Sarah, for, boy, what a wonderful teaching moment that we could increase our trust in God. So as we close this teaching time, I want to lead us in a simple prayer exercise. So if you want to stand up, go ahead and stand up. You can do it sitting down, either way. But it's going to involve your hands. And it's a prayer exercise that we learned from our Quaker friends, and it's simply called palms up and palms down. And the idea is whatever we want and whatever we pray for, we put our palms up to receive it from God. And whatever we want to let go of in our life, we turn our palms down as a symbol that we're letting go of it. So if you want to join me in this prayer, let's start out with our palms up. And God, we just want to start by saying, would you please increase our trust? During these dark room times, would you give us the grace to trust in you more and to rely on the fact that we can know that you are good and you are for us. And God, we just release anything in our lives that would question whether you're good to us and whether you're for us. And we let go of that, and anything that would cause us to press into the why that somehow would question whether you're fair to us and all that kind of stuff, we literally let go of that. And then, God, we turn our palms up again and we say, would you still our hearts? Would you speak peace into our hearts when we get troubled during this time and when we're losing patience and we don't know if we can take this anymore? Would you still our hearts and would you give us strength? And God, would you develop in us something beautiful? Would you capture this moment in our lives? And would you develop in us something beautiful? We pray. Amen. Friends, I just want to remind you, there you go. It's what develops in the dark that makes us beautiful in the light. So I want to say to you this week, happy developing.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. We are so glad that you took the time to hang out with us, and we will see you next week.